17-year-old Ethan Carter always thought his father, Daniel Carter, was perfect. A powerful businessman, a respected philanthropist, and a loving parent. But when Ethan stumbles upon hidden files in his father's study, everything shatters. Money laundering, bribery, murder. His father isn't just corrupt, he's running a full-blown criminal empire. Desperate for answers, Ethan digs deeper, only to find himself dragged into a dangerous game of deception and betrayal. But the real nightmare begins in court, when a mysterious woman bursts in, revealing a shocking family secret that flips Ethan's world upside down. Now, with his life on the line, Ethan and his fearless Aunt Mia must outrun ruthless pursuers, uncover the truth, and expose a conspiracy far bigger than his father. But will they survive long enough to do it? Before we start this wild ride, buckle up, get ready, and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got a special surprise you won't want to miss. Ethan Carter's life was picture perfect, or at least that's what the world believed. His father, Daniel Carter, was a man admired by many, a self-made millionaire, a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. To everyone else, Daniel was untouchable, a symbol of success and integrity. But to Ethan, something about his father never quite felt right. The cold, calculated way he spoke, the brief but noticeable moments when his smile faltered, the way he always seemed to be hiding something just beneath the surface. Ethan tried to ignore it, to push away the nagging feeling that something was off. He told himself he was overthinking it, that his father was just busy, that perfection always had its cracks. But everything changed the night he found the files. It started with a simple mistake: his father leaving his office door unlocked. Daniel was meticulous, always careful, always controlled. But this time the door was slightly ajar, inviting Ethan's curiosity. He hesitated at first, glancing down the hallway to make sure he was alone, then slipped inside. The study smelled like rich leather and expensive cologne, a place where only power and precision existed. Ethan had been inside before, but never like this. His father's desk was spotless, the bookshelves neatly arranged, every detail in place. But something caught his eye. A single file left open, carelessly placed on the desk. That was unlike Daniel. His father didn't make mistakes. Ethan moved closer, his pulse quickening as he scanned the documents inside. At first it looked like standard business transactions. Company names, bank accounts, wire transfers. But the deeper he read, the more wrong it felt. Many of the businesses didn't exist. The account numbers didn't trace back to any legitimate institutions. Some names were familiar: government officials, law enforcement, even known criminals. The amounts of money being moved were staggering, millions. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Then, near the bottom, he saw something that made his stomach drop. A list of names marked with red stamps. Some were labeled acquired. Others had a chilling word next to them: eliminated. Ethan's breath hitched. His father wasn't just involved in shady business, he was orchestrating something much worse. A sharp noise from the hallway made him freeze. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. He barely had time to shove the file back into place before the door swung open. Daniel Carter stood in the doorway, his piercing blue eyes locking onto Ethan with an expression that sent a chill down his spine. He didn't speak at first, just observed, as if calculating something in his mind. "What are you doing in here?" Daniel's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet his father's gaze. I was just looking for a pen." Daniel stepped forward, closing the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the room. "Let's talk." Ethan's heart pounded as his father shut the door, trapping them inside the office. The air in the room seemed to tighten, suffocating in its silence. Daniel Carter wasn't yelling, wasn't accusing. He simply stared at his son, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed yet unsettling. That was always the most terrifying part about his father, his ability to remain calm, even when the world around him burned. "A pen?" Daniel finally said, voice smooth, unconvinced. "Is that what you were looking for?" Ethan forced himself to nod, hoping his face didn't betray him. "Yeah, I needed one for homework and I thought you might have one in here." Daniel's lips curled into something that was almost a smile, but it never quite reached his eyes. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, like a predator testing its prey. "You've never come in here before without asking," he said, reaching for the chair behind his desk. He sat down, folding his hands together. "And yet tonight, you decide to look for a pen in my office." His father was already picking apart his lie, unraveling it piece by piece. His fingers twitched at his sides, but he forced himself to stand still. "It won't happen again," he muttered, turning toward the door. "Wait." The command was soft, but it stopped Ethan cold. "You're 17, Ethan. You're smart," Daniel said, voice thoughtful. "Too smart to believe you could walk into my office, go through my things, and not get caught." Ethan swallowed. His father wasn't guessing. He knew. He turned back, clenching his jaw. "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel exhaled, shaking his head as if disappointed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "There are things in this world you don't understand yet. Things you're not ready for." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Like what?" His father studied him for a long moment. Then, with a quiet chuckle, he stood up. "Like power," he said simply, stepping toward Ethan. "Like control." His hand rested on Ethan's shoulder, firm, but not rough. "I know you want to believe the world is black and white, but life isn't that simple. One day you'll see that what I do, what I've built, isn't about crime or corruption. It's about survival." Ethan wanted to push him away, wanted to yell that he wasn't some blind, naive kid, but instead he gritted his teeth and nodded. Daniel smiled, as if he had won. "Good," he murmured. "Now let's forget about tonight." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't push back. He walked out of the office without another word, but his mind was already racing. His father might have let him go, but Ethan wasn't about to let this go. He needed answers, and there was only one person he could trust to help him find them. Aunt Mia. Ethan barely slept that night. His father's words replayed in his head over and over, each syllable laced with something darker than just disappointment. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. Daniel Carter didn't make threats. He made decisions. And Ethan had no doubt that if necessary, his father would find a way to handle him the same way he handled everything else. By the time the sun rose, Ethan had made his own decision. He wasn't letting this go. Skipping breakfast, he grabbed his backpack, shoved his phone in his pocket, and slipped out of the house before his father even came downstairs. He didn't want to see him, didn't want to look into those calculating blue eyes and pretend everything was normal, because nothing was normal anymore. He walked fast, resisting the urge to look over his shoulder. He didn't think his father would follow him. Daniel probably assumed he was too scared to act. Good. Let him think that. Ethan took the bus across town to a small apartment complex that had definitely seen better days. He hesitated for only a second before knocking on the door of Mia Carter, his father's younger sister. The door swung open a moment later, revealing Mia in sweatpants, a tank top, and an annoyed expression. Her dark brown hair was tied into a messy bun, and there was a coffee mug in her hand. "Ethan," she raised an eyebrow, "since when do you show up at my door before noon?" "I need your help," he said quickly, glancing around. "Can I come in?" Mia studied him for a moment before stepping aside. "If this is about your dad, I already told you." "It's serious," Ethan cut in. "Please." Something in his tone must have gotten through to her, because she sighed and shut the door behind him. "All right," she said, walking toward her kitchen counter. "Start talking." Ethan took a deep breath. "I think Dad's involved in something dangerous," Mia snorted. "You think?" She took a sip of coffee. "Ethan, I've been telling you for years that your father isn't who he pretends to be." "I know," he admitted, "but I didn't want to believe it. Now I don't have a choice." He hesitated, then added, "I found files in his office. Transactions, fake businesses, names of people who've been killed." That made Mia pause. Her grip tightened on her coffee mug, and for the first time her expression turned serious. "You're sure?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I saw it with my own eyes." Mia exhaled sharply, rubbing her temple. "Damn it!" She muttered something under her breath before looking at him again. "Listen to me, Ethan. If you found something like that, it means your father is in deep, and if he knows you saw it—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Ethan swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Mia set her coffee down. "We expose him." Ethan felt his stomach twist at Mia's words. "We expose him." It sounded so simple, so direct, but the weight of it pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. Exposing Daniel Carter wasn't just about ruining his reputation. It was about destroying the life. The hesitation in his face, because she softened her tone. "I know this is a lot, kid, but if what you saw is real, if your father is as deep in this as I think he is, then we can't just sit on it. We need to act before he realizes you're a threat." Ethan clenched his fists. A threat. His own father might see him that way now. The thought made his chest tighten, but he forced himself to nod. "How do we do it?" Mia walked over to a shelf and pulled down an old beat-up laptop. "We go to the people who know how to dig," she said. "People who know how to make noise." She set the laptop down on the kitchen table, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up an email. Ethan leaned over her shoulder and saw a name he recognized immediately. "Samira Cross. You know her?" Ethan asked. Mia smirked. "Know her? I used to work with her before your father made sure I couldn't." Ethan had heard whispers of Mia's career as an investigative journalist, but Daniel always dismissed it as her being reckless and self-destructive. Now he wasn't so sure. "She's the best at what she does," Mia continued. "She's been trying to take down men like Daniel for years. If we give her proof, she won't just publish it, she'll make sure the whole world sees it." Ethan hesitated. "Will she believe us?" Mia glanced at him. "She will if we give her something solid." Ethan thought about the files in his father's office. He had only scratched the surface, but he knew the evidence was there. The problem was getting it without Daniel noticing. "I need to go back," Ethan said, his voice steady. Mia immediately shook her head. "No way. You already took a huge risk by going in there once. If you get caught, I won't." Ethan interrupted. "I know how careful he is. He won't think I'd be stupid enough to try again. That's exactly why it'll work." Mia didn't look convinced, but after a long moment she exhaled sharply. "Fine, but you cannot screw this up. Get in, get what we need, and get out. Then we take it straight to Samira." Ethan nodded, but his stomach churned with nerves. He wasn't just betraying his father, he was declaring war on him. As he left Mia's apartment, one thought pounded in his head. If Daniel finds out, I won't get a second chance. Ethan's hands were steady, but his heart was a different story. It pounded in his chest as he slipped through the front door of his house, moving quickly but carefully. The house was quiet, the deep stillness of early morning wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. His father was already at work, and the housekeeper wouldn't arrive for another hour. This was his window. He moved toward Daniel's office, stepping lightly, ears straining for any sign that he wasn't alone. The door was locked this time. No surprise. His father wasn't careless. Not twice. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal pick. Mia's idea. She had given it to him last night, told him to practice, warned him that once he went in, there was no turning back. The lock clicked open faster than he expected. Too easy. His father would never leave something this important unprotected. Ethan pushed the door open, stepping inside. The scent of leather and expensive wood polish filled his nose. The office was pristine, too pristine. His father must have gone through everything after their last conversation, making sure nothing was out of place. Ethan's eyes darted to the desk. It was clear, no files in sight. He clenched his jaw and moved quickly, pulling open drawers, checking under books, feeling along the edges of the desk for hidden compartments. Then he found it. A false bottom in the lowest drawer. His fingers pried it open and his breath caught. Documents, dozens of them, bank records, offshore accounts, signed contracts with names he didn't recognize. Ethan flipped through the pages, scanning them as fast as he could, and then he saw something that made his blood turn cold. His mother's name, Sarah Carter. The file wasn't like the others. It wasn't about money. It was short, with only a few pages inside, but the words on them made his stomach drop. Status: eliminated. Ethan felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. His mother had left them when he was 9. At least that's what his father always said. She had walked away, disappeared, no explanation, no goodbye. But this paper said otherwise. His mind was still spinning when a soft click echoed. Behind him, the unmistakable sound of the door locking. Ethan froze. Slowly he turned. His father stood in the doorway watching him with the same unsettling calm he always carried. But this time, there was something else beneath it, something sharper. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Daniel murmured, stepping into the room. Ethan's hands clenched around the papers. His pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, to scream. Father's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I think it's time we have a real conversation." Ethan's grip tightened around the papers in his hands, his pulse thundering in his ears. His father shut the office door with deliberate ease, the soft click of the lock setting every nerve in Ethan's body on edge. "You've been busy," Daniel said, stepping closer. His voice was calm, too calm. "I should have known you wouldn't let it go." Ethan's mind raced. There was no point in lying. The evidence was literally in his hands. But panic wouldn't help him now. He had to think, fast. "I saw Mom's. A name," he forced out, his voice hoarse. "What does this mean?" "Status eliminated." Daniel exhaled through his nose as if annoyed. "It means exactly what you think it does." Ethan's chest tightened. The walls of the office felt smaller, suffocating. He had spent years believing his mother had left, accepting the hole in his life as something inevitable. Now the truth sat in his hands, and it was worse than anything he could have imagined. "You," his voice cracked. "You had her killed?" Daniel tilted his head slightly, watching him with a look Ethan couldn't decipher. "I did what I had to do." A sickening wave of nausea rolled through Ethan's stomach. He wanted to lunge at his father, to scream, to demand answers, but every instinct in his body screamed at him to stay calm. He was trapped in a room with a man who had ordered his own wife's elimination. If he lost control now, he wouldn't make it out. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temple as if this was nothing more than a frustrating inconvenience. "You don't understand the world I operate in, Ethan. Power isn't about wealth or reputation. It's about control. Your mother made a choice that put this family at risk. She knew the consequences." Ethan's nails dug into his palm. "She was your wife, my mother." Daniel's expression didn't change. "And now she's a lesson." A cold, violent rage built in Ethan's chest, but he swallowed it down. His father was watching him, waiting, measuring. If Ethan made the wrong move, if he showed too much defiance, Daniel would shut him down permanently. "I didn't want you to find out this way," his father continued. "But since you have, I need to know where your loyalties lie." Ethan forced his hands to unclench. His breathing slowed, his mind sharpened. Loyalty, that was what this was about. His father was testing him. He exhaled, keeping his face carefully blank. I don't know what to think," he said, lowering his voice. "I need time." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Time, I can give you that." But Ethan knew he didn't have any time at all. His father didn't trust him, and now he was living on borrowed moments. He needed to run. Now, Ethan kept his expression neutral as he left his father's office, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. He had just lied to Daniel Carter and lived, but he knew that wouldn't last. His father had given him time, but in reality, he was already a dead man walking. Daniel didn't leave loose ends, and Ethan had just made himself one. He needed to get to Mia, now. Keeping his pace steady, he walked out of the house, forcing himself not to look over his shoulder. The moment he stepped outside, he sucked in a breath of cold air, but the relief was short-lived. His father had people watching him. He could feel it. Every step had to count. He made it to the bus stop and boarded, keeping his head down, hands clenched in his hoodie pockets. Every bump in the road sent his nerves on edge. Every glance from a stranger made his skin crawl. Was he being followed? Was his father already pulling the strings to make him disappear? By the time he got to Mia's apartment, his hands were shaking. He knocked twice, fast and urgent. The door swung open, and Mia barely had time to react before Ethan pushed past. Ethan, what the hell? He turned to her, his voice low and sharp. He killed Mom. Mia froze. The color drained from her face, her mouth parting slightly, but no words came out. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I found her name in his files. Status. Eliminated. He admitted it, Mia. He acted like it was nothing, like she was just a problem he needed to get rid of. Mia shut the door behind them, locking it quickly. When she turned back to him, something dark and dangerous burned behind her eyes. I knew he was ruthless, I knew he was dirty, but this... She let out a breath, gripping the edge of the counter. He really did it. Ethan stopped pacing. We need to leave. Now. Mia looked up at him. Leave? Ethan nodded. He gave me time, but that's a lie. He's probably already setting something up. I'm not going to wait around to find out what. Mia's expression hardened. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number. After a few rings, a woman's voice answered. It's Mia. We need to meet tonight. Ethan watched as Mia gave brief, clipped instructions. We take what we have to her and we go into hiding. Ethan swallowed. And if that's not enough, Mia looked at him, her face grim. Then we fight back. The weight of those words settled deep in Ethan's chest. His father had been the enemy all along, and now there was no turning back. This wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about surviving it. The diner Mia had chosen for the meeting was a relic of the past. Greasy booths, flickering neon lights, and the faint scent of burnt coffee lingering in the air. It was the kind of place where people kept their heads and down, where no one asked questions, perfect for a conversation that could get them killed. Ethan sat in the corner booth, his back to the wall, eyes darting between the door and the parking lot beyond it. Mia sat across from him, arms folded, scanning the room like she expected an ambush at any moment. She probably did. Then the door chimed. A woman entered, moving with quiet confidence, her dark brown hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes sharp and assessing. Samira Cross. She slid into the booth next to Mia without a word, setting down a small black notebook. Talk. Mia glanced at Ethan before leaning in. It's worse than we thought. My brother isn't just running an empire. He's executing people, including Ethan's mother. Samira's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw the way her fingers tightened around her pen. You have proof? Ethan pulled out his phone and handed it to her. He had taken photos of every document he could before escaping his father's office. Bank statements, offshore accounts, the file on his mother. Samira scrolled through them, her jaw tightening. This is enough to set off a full-scale investigation. Ethan exhaled, some of the tension in his chest easing, until Samira set the phone down and met his gaze. But it won't be enough to take him down. His stomach dropped. What? Samira tapped the screen. This proves financial crimes. Conspiracy, sure, but it doesn't put a body in the ground. Your father is powerful, Ethan. He has people in his pocket, judges and politicians, who will bury this if it's not airtight. Ethan clenched his fists. Then what do we do? Samira's eyes darkened. We need a witness. Someone from the inside. Someone who can confirm everything. Mia shook her head. That's a death sentence. Samira gave her a sharp look. So is waiting around while Daniel Carter cleans up his mess? Ethan felt a sick weight settle in his gut. His father had already eliminated people to protect himself. If they hesitated, they'd be next. Mia sighed, rubbing her temple. There's only one person who might still be alive that could help us. Ethan frowned. Who? Mia hesitated, then looked him straight in the eye. Your mother. The air in the diner seemed to freeze. Ethan felt like he had been punched in the chest. She's dead. He told you a lot of things, Mia said quietly. But if she's gone, why is he still so desperate to erase her? Ethan's breath came fast. His father had lied before. What if he was lying about this too? Then a terrible thought struck him. What if his mother was still alive? Ethan's mind reeled. His mother! Alive? The possibility sent a cold rush through his veins. For years, he had accepted that she was gone, that she had abandoned him, that she was nothing but a ghost in his past. But what if everything he believed had been a lie? Mia watched him carefully. I know it sounds impossible, but think about it. If Daniel really had her killed, why would he still have files on her? Why not just erase all traces? He's covering something up, Ethan. Samira leaned forward, her expression unreadable. If your mother is alive, she's the key. She knows everything. What your father's done, who he's working with, how deep this really goes. She hesitated. But if she's alive, that means she's in hiding. And if we try to find her, we won't be the only ones looking. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his breathing. Where do we even start? Mia exhaled. I have one lead. Years ago, after she disappeared, I found a burner phone in my mailbox. No note, no explanation, just one message. On it, she pulled out her own phone and scrolled through her notes before reading aloud. If he finds me, I'm dead. Keep Ethan safe. Don't look for me. Ethan felt his throat tighten. His mother had reached out, and Mia never told him. You knew, he whispered, anger creeping into his voice. You knew she might be out there, and you never told me. Mia met his gaze, unflinching. I was protecting you. If I had gone, after her, Daniel would have killed me, and if you had known, you wouldn't have stopped looking. Ethan wanted to be furious. He wanted to shout, to demand why she thought keeping this from him had ever been the right choice. But deep down, he knew she was right. If he had known, he would have never let it go, and that would have gotten him killed. The burner phone. Do you still have it? Mia shook her head. No, but I traced the signal back then. It pinged from a small town in Arizona, off the grid, barely on the map. Ethan's stomach turned. She had been so close. Samira nodded. That's where we start. Mia hesitated. It's a risk. If we go after her, Daniel will know we're digging. He'll come after us. Ethan straightened. His fear was still there, clawing at the edges of his mind, but he pushed past it. Then we don't give him the chance. Mia narrowed her eyes. What are you thinking? Ethan's hands clenched into fists. We don't just go after Mom. We go after him. We expose everything. He looked at Samira. How fast can you get this to the press? Samira smirked. If we do this right, by tomorrow morning the whole world will know who Daniel Carter really is. The plan was set. By morning, Daniel Carter's empire would begin to crumble. Samira had everything she needed. Bank records, offshore accounts, transaction histories, and most importantly, the file that listed Ethan's mother as eliminated. If his father had lied about that, what else had he buried? Ethan felt the weight of it pressing down on him. The moment this went public, his father would know. Who was behind it? There would be no more pretending, no more calculated games. Daniel would come for him, and he wouldn't come alone. We need to be gone before this breaks, Samira said, zipping up her laptop case. Your father has resources. As soon as he realizes he's exposed, he'll start tying up loose ends. Ethan knew what she meant. He was a loose end. Mia grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and tossed it to Ethan. Pack light. Essentials only. We need to get on the road now. Ethan's hands felt numb as he shoved clothes into the bag. He couldn't stop thinking about what his father's reaction would be when he saw the headlines. Would he be furious, panicked, or worse? Would he still be calm? They rushed out the back door of Mia's apartment, cutting through the alley, toward her car. Samira was already on her phone, preparing the final upload of the files. Within hours, the story would go live. But they never got that far. The gunshot came first, loud, sharp, cracking through the night air. Glass exploded from Mia's car window as she yanked Ethan down behind a dumpster. They had been waiting. Ethan's breath came in gasps as his heart pounded against his ribs. Mia reached for her gun, cursing under her breath. Samira flattened herself against the wall, her own weapon drawn. A voice called out from the shadows. Ethan! He knew that voice. Daniel Carter stepped into the dim glow of the streetlight, flanked by two men in dark suits. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He simply looked disappointed. I didn't want it to come to this, his father said, his voice smooth, steady. You've put me in a difficult position. Ethan gritted his teeth. You put yourself in this position, Daniel. sighed. I would have given you everything, Ethan. The business, the power, but you made a choice. His gaze flickered to the duffel bag in Ethan's hands. And now you forced mine. Mia shifted beside Ethan, tightening her grip on her gun. Ethan, she whispered, we need to move. Now. Daniel must have heard her because his lips pressed into a thin line. He gave a small nod. One of his men raised a gun. Ethan barely had time to react before the second gunshot rang out. Mia shoved him hard, and the world blurred as he hit the pavement. Then he heard her scream. Ethan hit the pavement hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. His ears were ringing, his mind struggling to process the chaos around him. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed in his skull. And then, Mia's scream. He scrambled to his knees, eyes darting toward her. Mia was slumped against the alley wall, her hand clutching her side, blood spreading between her fingers. No, 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 Mia! Ethan lunged toward her, but she gritted her teeth and shoved him back. Run! She hissed. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp, commanding. Ethan's breath came fast, frantic. He could hear footsteps, Daniel's men closing in. Samira had taken cover behind a dumpster, her gun raised, returning fire. Daniel's voice cut through. The chaos, calm as ever. Ethan, stop this! Ethan looked up at him, rage and panic twisting inside his chest like a storm. His father stood in the open, unfazed by the bullets flying around him, watching his son like he was disappointed. You don't have to keep running, Daniel said, stepping forward. His men held their fire. You're still my son. Ethan's fists clenched. You murdered my mother. Daniel exhaled through his nose. She betrayed me. His voice was even, as if that alone justified everything. And now you're doing the same. Ethan felt his hands shaking, his body torn between fear and fury. He had spent years idolizing this man, trusting him, and now he saw the truth beside him, struggling to move. Ethan's stomach clenched. If he didn't get her out of here, she was going to die. Samira took another shot, forcing Daniel's men to duck. Then she grabbed Ethan's arm. We need to move. Now! Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned back to his father. This is over. Daniel's expression didn't change. No, it's not. Ethan knew he was right. As long as Daniel Carter was alive, this would never be over. With a final glance at the man who had once been his hero, Ethan grabbed Mia's arm and hauled her up. She gasped in pain, but she didn't fight him. Samira covered them as they stumbled. Toward the end of the alley, Ethan's mind racing. They had the evidence. The story was going live. The world was about to see Daniel Carter for what he really was, but Ethan had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated his father. As they reached the street, tires screeched in the distance. Headlights flooded the alley. A black SUV barreled toward them. Daniel wasn't just letting them go. He was making sure they never left at all. The SUV hurtled toward them, its tires screeching against the pavement. Ethan barely had time to react before Samira yanked him and Mia behind a parked car. The headlights flashed past, and the vehicle skidded to a stop, blocking the alley's exit. Doors flew open. More of Daniel's men stepped out, guns drawn. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. There was nowhere left to run. Mia sagged against him, her breathing ragged. Blood seeped through her shirt, her face pale from the wound. She wouldn't last much longer. Samira grabbed Ethan's wrist. We make a break for the side street, she whispered. I'll cover you. Ethan swallowed hard. His father had planned for this. He had known they would run. There was no escape, unless Ethan changed the rules. He squared his shoulders, stepped forward and shouted, I'm right here! Let Mia go! Daniel's men hesitated, glancing at one another. Then from behind them, Daniel stepped into the street, hands in his pockets, composed as ever. You're out of options, Ethan, he said, his voice smooth, controlled. Surrender, and I'll make sure Mia gets medical attention. Ethan's stomach twisted. He wanted to believe him, but he had lied too many times. I'm not going anywhere with you. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. You always were stubborn. He motioned toward his men. Bring him in! The moment the first man moved, Samira fired. The gunshot split the night, and chaos erupted. Ethan grabbed Mia, dragging her toward the nearest building. Bullets hit the pavement around them. Samira covered their escape, ducking between cars, forcing Daniel's men to take cover. Then suddenly a new sound cut through the chaos. Sirens. Daniel's men hesitated, looking to him for instruction. But for the first time, Ethan saw something he had never seen in his father before: uncertainty. Then his phone buzzed. A single notification flashed on the screen. Breaking news. Daniel Carter, under federal investigation for corruption and murder. Ethan's breath caught. Samira had done it. In the distance, he could see red and blue lights speeding toward them. Someone, everyone, had seen the evidence. The world knew. Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned to his men. "Leave, now!" They hesitated, but a single sharp look sent them scattering. The SUV peeled away. The shadows swallowed his father as he disappeared into the night. Ethan exhaled sharply, his whole body shaking. It was over, or at least it should have been. Mia groaned beside him. Samira was already calling for an ambulance. The sirens grew louder, but Ethan's mind raced. His father had lost this battle, but Ethan knew Daniel Carter wasn't done. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about finishing what his mother started, because as long as his father was out there, Ethan would never truly be free.